data monetization, and that's essentially what it sounds like: getting data that you have and monetizing it. It's pretty simple. Let's go ahead and start. Okay, so just straight out the gate. So I believe that every app, website, or digital business should sell their own data as part of their business strategy. Everybody has data. The main aim and the thing that you have to try and look for is to find somebody to buy that data. While that isn't always easy, hopefully after this session, I'll be able to provide a bit more light in terms of what you can do to actually sell data that you either collect via your app, as I mentioned, or website, or any other data collection that you're currently doing. So quickly, what is data monetization? As mentioned, it's the way to generate income, right, from available data. And as I said, it's a way to make money from the data that you own. All right. It doesn't help that you're selling other people's data. That, number one, ethically is not probably the best practice, and legally you're going to run into some issues later on. So the best thing to do is create your own data and then sell that data later on. I'm sure you've also heard everybody normally says that data is the new oil, and this is something that I don't really I don't really like this phrase, but it is true. I think it is something that is required and it is pretty much the new oil, because you can sell it. All right, so data and what we'll get from data is knowledge and insight. Normally knowledge is quite visible, it's easy to find, it sort of sits on the surface, whereas insight is what you get from the analysis of the data and the actual viewing and reviewing of that data. So in terms of the insight, it's normally invisible, hard to develop, and it's not normally something that is common sense, not part of common sense. It is stuff that you identify from the data that you actually analyze. Okay. And so in terms of oil, we have to, oil powers, motor vehicles and airplanes and boats and all that sort of stuff. So oil is actually powering something. So what does data power? In terms of data, it powers AI, machine learning. Without data, you're not really going to go anywhere. If you have a machine learning algorithm, an algorithm without data is pretty useless. Then you've also got business analytics, business intelligence, marketing and consumer behavior, and it is also information about the real world. Okay, so that is what data essentially will power in the future, and that's what it powers right now. And that's why it is something that can be monetized. Also, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to stop and we can answer a question, or if there's something you don't understand, please feel free to go ahead and ask. Also, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. So if you can just a quick answer. Everyone say yes, no? Yes, excellent.
Perfect,
thank you.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right, so 4 questions to ask before you monetize your data. Okay, the first one is what types of data can be monetized? All right, so this is quite important. People don't normally understand what types of data can be monetized. And while there are numerous types of data today, I'm going to focus on 2 specific ones, and that is organizational and company data, and the other one is real world data. Okay, it is, as I mentioned, it's important to understand that I'm taking one specific view of data monetization, and I'm not giving you the entire sort of realm of data that's available, because we'll be here the whole day. Okay, so in terms of organizational data or company data that you might, that someone might ask you to actually review and look at, there are 2 sections to it. I would say there's knowledge and insights. And as I mentioned, insights is just information about the data. What have you learned from the data? And then from that data, you can also develop efficiencies. You can see where there are bottlenecks in their system based off their data. You can also use it for consumer targeting and also marketing. So the data that people collect from a company, for example, let's go with Coca-Cola. They look at their data and they can see that, for example, a town in the Northern Cape, they really enjoy Coke specifically, and during December, the amounts go up, let's say times 10. That means that they know that in December, they need to make sure that there's 10 times the normal amount of Coke that you'd actually have in that city needs to be available. People perhaps don't like Fanta or Sprite, so they only really need to push Coke. That means that they can save money in terms of shipping. They know that they need to produce, or they know that they need to produce a lot of Coke. They need to send it to that area, and they don't need to send as much Sprite and Fanta. These is just a basic example of some of the consumer targeting or market, well, not marketing, consumer targeting you can do, and using the data to make efficient decisions about the business. Okay, and then in terms of real world data, this is my favorite kind of data. You've got your sensors, IoT devices, points of interest, road information, environmental data, traffic, and pedestrian traffic as well. These are also just a short or small number of examples of real world data that you can look at and you can generate or monetize. This can be self-generated or it can be third-party data. So sometimes what people do specifically is they will actually look at different data sets that people have, and they'll license some data from one company, license data from another company, and they'll join that. And when they actually join that data, it becomes a lot more powerful because you've got a lot more data to actually analyze, and that can really generate a bit more in terms of monetization. The other one was not the other one, but in terms of these two types of data, you've got live data, which is also called dynamic data, and static data. So static data is something that is stationary, it stays there, it doesn't really move much, the attributes don't change that often, whereas live data or dynamic data will constantly be changing. Live data is also something that you can access via an API that is continually streaming through to you. So for example, if you think of an EV station, where you go and charge an electric vehicle, for example, that will actually provide you with which charger is open, how long the charge, or how long it'll take until the charge has been completed, or if there is even power at that station. That is essentially dynamic data. But I'll give you another quick example. If you go to a mall, or you think about a mall, you'll see that the static data is, everything in the mall is essentially static, and all of the points of interest, so whether it's Queen's Park or Woolworths or Checkers, whatever it might be, the stores in that mall, that is static data because they're not going anywhere, right? They'll be there for a couple of years. The attributes of that data is not likely to change. So that's why it's static. And then in terms of dynamic data, that would be the people going through the actual mall. And the reason why it is dynamic is because it's live. You don't know who will be coming into the door. You don't know how many people will be there. You don't know how much they will spend. You don't know which store they will go to. This all relates to dynamic data. It's constantly changing, whereas the static is the same every day and might only change every 1 or 2 years or 3 years. Okay. So what data can be collected about the real world? So here we just have a picture of a normal street. I'm just gonna give you some examples of what you can actually collect from this data. Okay, so the first one is point of interest data. This is obviously some sort of Asian restaurant over here. And with regards to point of interest data, you can collect the name of the place, the location, the street address, phone number, email address, their opening hours, do they have wheelchair access, and also which cards are they using? Do they allow American Express, MasterCard, Visa? Is it cash only? These are all the attributes you can actually collect just from one little point of interest. And then another one is your air quality. So in terms of a city needs to ensure that the air quality maintains certain limits, not so much for Johannesburg because our limits are way above what it should be. But that is one type of data you can collect. The next one is parking and fees. So for parking, for example, if you have a sensor there, you can also determine if that parking is available or if it's been taken. Perhaps you can even add things like booking to that specific parking sensor if you want to. Then we've got traffic data. So as I'm sure you know, whenever you use a navigation app, it normally provides you with the traffic data and says it'll take you X amount of time to get there, but there is a lot of traffic today, so it might take an extra hour or two. Next one is speed limits and lanes. It is important to understand how many lanes exist on a road because that also determines how much traffic can fit on there, as well as speed limits. They also basically would tell you how much, not how much, but how fast the traffic can actually move on a specific road. We've got pedestrian data. Pedestrian data also is quite dynamic, and pedestrian data can be used for things like city planning, understanding when people are moving through the city at what time. Is there high demand between 8 and 10 a.m. in the morning? Is that when you see the most amount of traffic data? It's also used by planners to ensure that there is sufficient amount of pedestrian crossings, for example, or the pavement is wide enough. All that stuff comes from pedestrian data. Then you got your public transport. Also, once again, not only do you have the bus routes and the schedules, which bus at what time will be coming through a particular stop, but also in public transport, you can measure how many people are on a specific bus. So if the bus is really full, once again, between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m., you then know that perhaps there needs to be more buses in a specific area if the buses are too full. Okay, so you can use that data to gain insights and share it with the bus company or the city of Joburg or Cape Town, wherever you might be. Next one is city infrastructure. This you can also collect. So this is all the street poles, electricity lines. If you want, you can even add manholes. Anything that's related to city infrastructure, you can also collect. Next one is traffic lights. So a lot of the time you need to be able to tell people where a specific traffic light is. Whenever they are being navigated somewhere, it's good to know where these things are so that they don't actually break the rules and they get sufficient warning. And the last one is just street signs. So these are important. They'll tell you if there's no left turn, no right turn, no U-turn, if there's a restricted driving maneuver. All these things are required when you are providing the data or looking to sort of sell the data. You need to identify what all of these attributes are. And just from looking at a street view like this, you'll see that there is a lot of different types of data out there that people actually require and that can be monetized. So regardless of the application that you have created or the website, or if you're collecting data for whatever reason it might be, there is a market potentially there's a potential market that you could actually reach out to and most likely sell your data. Okay, so next question is data quality. How do we ensure data quality? So the best way to ensure data quality is through sufficient data governance or data management, right? And this is essentially, you can do this through a specifications document to ensure that you have some amount of standardization. Because if you have poor data quality, number one, when a prospective buyer wants to buy that data, they will look at your data quality, they'll look at your specifications and your standardization document that you have. And if it's not up to scratch and they can see that you haven't thought about how you're actually going to, number one, collect the data, you really need to specify how you actually plan on collecting the data. So are you going to collect data early in the morning, late in the afternoon? You're going to collect it throughout the day? What type of attributes are you going to collect about that type of data? So for example, let's go with points of interest. If you're going to collect data, you need to ensure that you collect all those attributes. So you need the address, you need the actual longitude and latitude, you'll need phone number, you need to know what type of store it is, right? Is it a clothing store? Is it a specialty store that's selling, random sort of items? Is it a dog store? Is it food? And when you look at food, you could also say this is a restaurant. It might serve only hamburgers, or perhaps it is an Asian restaurant that sells Chinese food. You need to look at all of these attributes when you're collecting data, and you need to specify that specifically in your documentation, because not only will it assist a potential buyer to understand what data you have, but moving between teams and ensuring data quality between one team in Johannesburg and another one in Cape Town. If everyone's following the same specifications, you're always going to be getting back the same data that you require. Okay. Another item that really helps when you look at data quality is ensuring that you have a unique ID for each feature or item that you're collecting, right? This enables you to, number one, track the data. It enables the tracking of any deletions or updates. Also, if you're providing data to a supplier, if you're providing data to a buyer, you can then provide them with those IDs. And if you provide them with the IDs, they can then track it against their data that they bought previously. And when you provide them with a new data set, it helps them understand which ones have been deleted or updated, which is very, very important. Next one is naming conventions. A lot of people normally get this wrong in terms of data that they provide specifically to here. For example, let's say Shell, one person might call it Shell petrol station, and the other one might just say it's Shell station. So that little difference there can lead to sort of issues where we're looking at naming. If naming is consistent and has a naming convention, so a naming convention is essentially just a standardized way of naming a particular item. Okay. Also, you can use it for the saving of files, so that you know that you add the dates, so you can see when a particular file was updated. All these things really help to ensure the data quality and ensuring that there is standardization through using the specifications document. The next one is data storage. Also very important. You need to ensure that the data you are storing is, number one, being secured. It's being stored on multiple devices or hard drives. You have a backup for the data that you're actually storing, because you don't want to store everything on one drive and then it goes or it dies and all of your work is lost and all of your data is gone. So you need to ensure that when you store data, you have a process to follow to make sure that you save it on, you basically back it up. The next one in terms of data quality is privacy. Now, I think a lot of people might think that for privacy, perhaps this isn't that important when you're looking at data quality, but it is probably the most important thing, because your privacy and how you design your collection methods. If you're collecting data and you're collecting people's names and ID numbers and phone numbers, and you don't have to, why are you collecting data that later on you will have to delete? Number one, you're using a lot more time to actually collect data you don't need. And number two, when it comes to privacy, you then have to ensure that you're following the POPI Act. You're not only storing the data and securing the data correctly, but you are following privacy guidelines. This also happens with regards to the unique ID. If you are following privacy guidelines, you need to ensure that if you are collecting someone's name, you need to provide them with a specific ID so that you can remove their name and still be able to track that data, but just through using a unique ID. Okay, so privacy is very, very important when it comes down to the ensuring data quality. Okay, next one. So how is data value determined? So we have 5 items here. The main one is data quality. That is what we just spoke about. So when you're actually trying to sell the data that you have, as I mentioned, if your data quality is not standardized and you don't have a robust system in place to ensure that the data you collect is fantastic, it is going to reduce the amount of, also reduce the value of your data set. Okay. The next one, you need to look at your customers. Who will buy the data, right? So here we have an example at the bottom. I've got some Eskimos and some ice, and I've also got the desert, essentially. You cannot go and sell ice to an Eskimo, right? That is zero value for them, okay? In the same way that I can't go and sell, I can't sell car sales data to McDonald's. They have no use for that data. It doesn't help them in any way. So you need to, number one, look at who the customers are, who are the people that actually need your data, and then approach them and sell the data to those people. Okay, so you need to find the right customer for the right data. That is where you achieve the value. Next one is your data attributes. With regards to data attributes, the more attributes you have about a specific item, the better it is in terms of the data that you have. So as I mentioned with the point of interest example, the Asian restaurant that we were looking at, if you are only collecting the location of that restaurant or the location of all restaurants in a specific city, let's say Johannesburg, and someone comes to me and says, hey, Clint, I want you to buy this data of all the restaurants in Johannesburg, and all I have is the location. Okay, the location and the name, that is fine. That's pretty good data, I'm not going to lie. But if someone else comes to me and says, hey, I have the location, I've got the name, I have the phone number, I have what type of restaurant it is, I have the email address, the business hours, what cards are being used, is it wheelchair friendly, are there bathrooms available? Okay, now I have 9 or 10 attributes that suddenly make this data really, really valuable versus another person that has only given me the location of it. So whenever you collect data, or whenever you're designing whatever it might be, always try and make sure that you are collecting as much data as you possibly can. You already, for example, if you're already at the point of interest and you're collecting data, collect all the data that's available. Go into the store, get as much data as you can from it, or from the window, look at the business hours and collect the business hours. Don't just collect the location and the name. You want to collect as many attributes as possible, even attributes that perhaps might not be used by a specific supplier at the moment. It's always good to collect as much as you can, and you can provide that to them, which will definitely increase the value of your data. The next one, in terms of determining your value, you need to look at the competition. Who else is providing the same data that you are providing, right? So if there are 10 or 20 people providing the same data, you obviously cannot charge a premium because you have to look at what the competitor might be charging. Essentially, it's basic rules of business. Look at what your competition is. If you're the only one providing that service, that means that your value has now increased. Okay. Next one is your cost of collection. You need to really determine how much it costs to collect that data. Whether it's data that you're hosting on a website and you're asking people to add in specific data on the website, you need to understand what are the hosting costs of that. What are the costs for the domain? All of that really does form part of the cost collection. Also, if you're doing manual collection and you have a team of people that are out there collecting data using a PDA and a GPS, you need to look at how much the PDAs cost, how much the GPS might cost, how much is their labor, what are they actually collecting. Understanding the cost of collection means that you can determine an inherent value and understand what is the minimum price you should pay for it. But at the same time, any company that wants to buy your data has already looked at the cost of collection. They've already determined and said, okay, if I want to buy this specific data for each item, I know it's going to cost me 4 Rand. But here is someone that's managed to go out and collect the data for 375. I would rather buy the data from them than create an entire process of data collection and pay the 4 Rand for it that I would have paid for it. Okay, so you really need to understand the cost of collection to determine your value in the end. All right, I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, this is also quite important. This is just a focus on the data attributes that we have. So as I mentioned, you need to collect as many attributes as you can. So with regards to location data, I know quite a few people are doing, or they were doing vehicle tracking or tracking taxis or creating a new sort of Uber or delivery vehicle, whatever it might be, any vehicle tracking that you are doing, not only can you collect the longitude and latitude of a vehicle, and that just means the location of the vehicle, but you are also collecting the direction of travel, and you're collecting the speed of a vehicle. And from the speed of a vehicle, you can determine traffic in a specific area. You can also determine the speed limit. So if you have the same vehicle going down a road every day, and you notice that they are only going between 60 and 70 kilometers, you can then assume that the speed limit on that road is actually 60 kilometers, right? In the same way that if you see that on a specific day, the car or the vehicle is moving very slowly, you can assume that there is traffic. This is all very important. This is called telematics data, and this is important for a number of companies. Here, Google, TomTom, they're all looking for traffic data. Obviously, you need to have thousands of vehicles that you're actually tracking if you're trying to provide live traffic data or even historical traffic data. But what I'm trying to get out here, what I'm trying to say is that it's important to collect as many attributes as you can, right? Using what you've already got in place. So, yeah. Next one I'm gonna look at is parking data. Once again, you can collect the parking location, right? And if you have a sensor in place, you can also collect whether it is occupied or whether it's empty, right? Which is very important to actually understand. You also then can determine times. So when is it busy versus when is it empty, right? And you can then offer, using that intelligence, you could say to the company that is running the parking sort of sensors, you can say, look, at let's say 8 p.m., there is no one parking in your lot. Why don't you reduce the price between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. and then that should hopefully drive a bit more traffic into your particular parking spaces. That is one way that you can use the data to actually increase the business. Okay, so I can't stress this enough that you need to collect as many attributes as you can using whatever you have. If you're collecting environmental data, you can obviously collect things like the air quality, you can collect temperature, you can collect the pressure. There's a number of other attributes that you can collect with environmental data. Okay. Next one is point of interest. So I think I've spoken about this quite a few times, but I'll go through it one more time. As I mentioned, you can collect the location, the latitude and longitude of a POI. You can collect the type of store, the cards allowed, opening, closing times, wheelchair access, bathroom access. All of that data is very, very important, and it increases the value of your data. Okay. Next one is intellectual property. I'm just going to give a quick, sorry, 1 second. Okay, with regards to intellectual property, the data that you collect, whether it's on your application or you're doing field data collection or it is from your website, whatever it is, you need to ensure that you have some amount of intellectual property or IP to the data. Okay, you don't want to give that away, and the best way to do that is through data licensing. Okay, so when you license your data, this means that you have an agreement with a specific company or the person that's buying your data, and you're saying via contract you are buying 5,000 points of interest from me for 5,000 Rand. These are the terms. You now have access to the data, and you can utilize that data for, you can even add a specific amount of time for 10 years if you want. After that, you are then licensing that data to a specific person. Then you can also take that same data and you can license it to someone else and to another party and another party. You can license the data to as many companies or people as you want to via a data licensing model. All right. In the same way that you're licensing your data, you can also purchase data from other people via a license. All right. The license is essentially just permission to use that data. So whenever you have data and you want to sell data, please make sure that you are using a data license. I have an example of someone that I've been speaking to about for data for a specific, I think it was the DRC, and this gentleman had great data. it was really impressive, the data that he had. But when we actually ran evaluation on the data, I noticed that the data was actually taken from, for example, OpenStreetMaps, right? Which is not allowed. And so I asked him, yeah, I'll get to the question now. You should, sorry, let me get back to what I was talking about. With regards to OSM, I asked him, did you license this data to OSM? And he said, no, I didn't. I just went on the OSM website and I added all of the data that we had to the website. Okay, and the problem with that is once you do that, you provide OSM with license for the data because they have terms and conditions that you've agreed to when you log in, and anything that you add, you automatically give to them. So when he then wanted to provide me with OSM data, I couldn't accept it because he no longer owns the license to that data. Okay, so this is a very, very important part of any process or any data that you're going to sell to someone. You need to make sure that you are able to license it via whether it's a content agreement license or any sort of license. You need to do this responsibly, do your research, find the right contract, please, because I've seen it happen to quite a few people and it's not very nice. Next one is do not web scrape data. Okay, so a lot of people have spiders that they have gone and created that scroll the web and actually get data. So for example, let's use the point of interest example again. If, for example, Google's API is open and you can go in and you can scrape all of their data. Once again, someone did that and they approached me and said, Clint, I have all of the data. I have 500,000 points of interest. And I asked, how did you collect the data? Can you show me your specifications? What did you actually do? And he said, oh, I web scraped the data and I took it from Google. You know, I've been spending 6 months building the spider to take the data. And I said to him, look, man, you don't actually have the license to do that. If you look at the Google's terms and conditions, which everyone should do for any website, it says there that you cannot use the data or scrape the data for commercial reasons or purposes. So once again, this guy spent a lot of time and his own money building this spider, getting data from Google that nobody can use. So from a here perspective, we cannot buy that data because that data essentially has not been licensed responsibly or ethically. He didn't follow correct procedures to actually source that data. So we cannot use that data in any way, shape, or form. So web scraping is very, very dangerous. So make sure that wherever you source the data from, you first review the terms and conditions. If they say that it cannot be used for commercialization, then please make sure that you ask them for permission or ask them to license the data. So if you license the data from them, you can go ahead and scrape all you want. Then that data essentially, because you've licensed it, is your data, right? And you can then license it to someone else because you are now adding your own IP to it. You are maybe adding it with other data, or you are changing it in some way that is not the original data. But the main thing is that you have permission to get that data. The last point is data versus database. In terms of data, data represents reality, right? And it cannot be copyrighted. If there's a stop street on the corner of Happy Street and Malcolm Street, anybody can go and collect that stop street. Okay, that's data that's there. Anyone can collect it. What you can actually copyright, or what you can add your IP to, is how you attribute that stop sign. So if you are saying that this stop sign is all in capitals, the metal they use is steel, here is a tracking ID for it, whatever data about that item that you can add, whatever attributes you can add to that stop sign, that essentially can then be copyrighted and you can add your IP to that. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and answer some of the questions that are on here quickly. Okay, so the first one was, Clint, should we look at the kind of licenses that we use? Yeah, I would say that in terms of the kind of licenses that you use, you should definitely look at it. you need to read through the license. It depends also what you mean by the kind of licenses that we use. Are you talking more about a purchasing license, like you want to go and purchase data from someone, or are you saying that you have data and you want to review your own data agreement? Maybe you can just add a bit more information, and I can probably answer it a bit better. And then we have another question. This is for me. It seems like to monetize data, data should be the core business. How does one monetize data while having a business that doesn't collect data as its main purpose? All right, so in terms of trying to monetize data that isn't the main purpose, that's fine. What you're doing is you're still running your main core business, right? So whatever your business is, you run it, that's fine. Whatever data that you're able to collect while running that business, that is the data that you can monetize. So it's not something that needs to be the core business, but it is something that can be on the sideline. So also for data, you can't sell 10 pieces of data to someone, right? They're normally looking for thousands of pieces of data. So it will take some time. So while you're running your core business, the data you're collecting on the side is more of a long-term game that you should be looking at, or a game that you should be looking at. So you're like I said, as your business is running, you are continually collecting data. And then once you've got a good amount of data, you can say, okay, let's see who would actually want to buy this data. I think that's the best way to look at it. Obviously, there are models where you can make sure that monetizing data is your main business, and that is the only thing you're going to do. In which case, then you need to ensure that your strategy is on point from the beginning. But if it's just as part of a sideline business, then that's okay. That's what I was saying in the beginning. It is important for every business, every app developer or application or website to actually collect whatever data they can responsibly, and then sell that data later on. There's no reason why you can't sell it, in my opinion. Okay, the next one. Okay, so privacy. This is obviously very big. The reason why we have privacy is, privacy is we want to use privacy to build it. I think I've named privacy 3 times already in this presentation, because it's really, really important. It builds trust between you and your user. If you're collecting user data, it also builds trust between you and a potential supplier. As the examples I mentioned now, I don't trust the person that wanted to sell me data, because as nice a person as they are, they weren't very honest in terms of what they were doing. They represented the data as their own data, and then when I did an evaluation, I found that the data was not theirs, and now I don't trust them. Also, in terms of their specifications document that I requested, or any sort of special specifications, they couldn't provide that to me. Okay, so in terms of privacy, remember, user data collected via an app or other process should follow local and international privacy standards. So, for example, from Here Technologies point of view, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I acquire data for the company, and one of the things that I have to do is I look at the local POPI Act, and I also have to look at the GDPR. That is a European privacy standard that is currently being used. Because we are an international company and we're based, our head office in Europe, I have to ensure that any South African supplier not only complies with POPI, but they also comply with GDPR, because our data goes onto central servers in Europe, and that all has to follow the same guidelines. So whenever you are creating data and you think to yourself, oh, am I respecting the privacy of my users here? You need to make sure that you actually are, that you're following the correct procedures. Companies will not purchase data which can in any way identify individuals or their activities. This is 100% correct. Also, from a Here perspective, we will not buy data with any personal information. So if we see someone's name, ID number, phone number, sometimes even email address, we will not purchase that data. We put the onus on the supplier, and we go back to them and say that we cannot accept this data because it contains personal information. And I'm sure you're thinking now, well, you can still buy the data and then delete the data later on, right? That's unfortunately not how it works when it comes to GDPR. With regards to that, if you are actually purchasing data, you then become, the onus of privacy falls on you. So if we want to avoid that completely, we speak to the supplier and tell them to get rid of any tracking data that's on there. Also with regards to telematics data, so for example, if you are using a GPS or you're using your phone to navigate from one place to another, from home to the store, that data that is available there is actually getting tracked. So there is a unique identifier for your phone, and it picks up that you are leaving your house. It tracks you all the way to the shop, and then it shows that you have now ended your journey at that specific store. Part of privacy is saying that we cannot collect the first 500 meters of a trip and the last 500 meters of a trip, because that provides some amount of privacy, because we don't know where within that 500 meters your house is. Also, IDs need to change. So every time somebody uses their phone, a new ID needs to be created. You cannot utilize the same ID, because if you utilize the same ID, you can then track and follow that person. You can pick up a trend with that ID, and you can sort of see where they're constantly going, what those people are doing. So this is all part of privacy and how it plays with regards to companies. Yeah, last point is, as part of your overall data governance or management, privacy is central, as it determines how data can be stored, analyzed, and collected. All right, so it is very, very important. It is the heart of what you're doing. And also remember that data security and data privacy are not necessarily the same thing. Data security is all about securing your data from hackers, whereas data privacy is securing the privacy of your users, right? Okay, so in terms of monetization, this is how you can, or where you can essentially monetize your data, right? So number one, we've got the data marketplace. So if you Google data marketplace today, you will find a number of marketplaces that are out there that are available, that you can actually log in, host your data, provide a sample set of data, and then you can sell that data to pretty much anyone in the world. They also have licenses there, so you don't have to come with your own specific license. The license is part of the data marketplace platform. I know that here Technologies has their own data marketplace as well, and we allow pretty much anyone to go on there and sell their data as they need to. And any one of our competitors can go ahead and buy that data. We also sell our own data on the marketplace. Next one is a customer data monetization model. This is what Facebook, Google, LinkedIn use. So while their service is free and we can log in and use it to connect with our peers, that data that we are adding there, they then use that data and they sell that data. So for example, if you're creating some sort of social platform and it's free for your users to use, you can take their data and then sell their data, whether it's via a data marketplace or specifically for, let's say, insurance companies or advertising companies, marketing companies, whatever it might be. You can then take that data and sell it off. The next one, or another way that you can identify is, another way that you can monetize your data is through identifying customers and approaching them directly. So for example, if you see that you have a lot of medical health information for a specific, let's go with Johannesburg. So you have an application, or you have somehow managed to collect medical data about a lot of users in Johannesburg in specific areas, you can go and reach out to an insurance company and say, hi, I have medical data for all these people. What then happens is they then review that data, or you could even review it. They look for the insights in that data. They want to know how many people in a specific suburb are dying from a heart attack. They want to know, well, not dying from a heart attack, how many people have issues with their heart or lungs, or what sort of health conditions are associated with what area, right? So that's how an insurance company would look at that, because then that means they would then be able to use the data and say, oh, people that live in Randburg, for example, appear to be having, let's go with heart conditions, right? So if I apply to a health insurance company and I say I live in Randburg, they're then going to say, actually, you have a higher likelihood of a heart issue. We're actually going to increase your premium just a little bit because of the possibility that you might have a heart condition, because everyone else in that area has a heart condition. Okay, this is how you can identify customers. Next one is insight as a service. So by looking at organizational data sets, you can identify insights and knowledge, right? This just means that, as I mentioned with the Coca-Cola example, if Coca-Cola are trying to identify insights, or any company, they want to know what's actually happening with their customers. They want to know how they can better sell to them, what products should they sell to them, when should they sell it to them, which product is not working for them. You can sort of work together with them, analyze the data, and provide those insights to them. Because, yeah, you provide those insights to them. The other one is through obtaining insights from your own data and selling it. So this is another way. So if you are collecting data and you pick up specific insights from that data, you then need to identify which company that insight might suit, and then approach them and attempt to sell the data to them. So the last page that we have is just the data monetization and business model canvas. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to go through all of it. I think it's only 8 minutes left. But what I will do is I'll share this presentation on Slack. So if you want to have a look at this business model that I put together, please feel free to do that. But I'll go through it as hopefully not too quickly. But we'll start here in the middle with the value proposition. And in terms of the value that you can, or the value proposition, you have data as a service, insight as a service, machine learning, business intelligence, and real-world data collection. All right, so this is the value that you propose or you can provide to any number of companies. Okay. Next one is your customer relationships. We've got co-creation, which just means that you can work together with a company. So if you approach a company and you say, hi, I would like to, or I provide machine learning and analysis and insights, we can work together to review your data and understand what value we can get from it. Okay. We also have, let's go transactional. Transactional is more marketplace, where you have data and you want to sell that data to a specific supplier. There's no real relationship that you are actually engaging in. It's just data for money, essentially. Let's go down to let's go next to the customer segments, right? You can be as diversified as you want to, or you can stick specifically to a specific niche or a specific company, right? It really just depends. I'm going to skip the channels. I don't think that's too important, especially for time right now. Then we've also got the revenue streams. So in terms of revenue, you can use a licensing model. Asset sale. Asset sale is essentially just like marketplace, where you add your data to a marketplace, or you host the data on your own website and people can purchase it from you. Or you can do it via subscription fees. Subscription fees is normally better if you're using it insight as a service, where someone can, you can collect subscription fees from them, and from the subscription fees, you can provide insights on data that they have on a monthly, weekly, or yearly basis, whatever it might be. And then in terms of your cost structure, so this is stuff that you're going to spend money on, right? You will obviously spend money on your website or your application, the hosting of it, whatever fees you might need to pay to put it on the iStore or the Play Store. And then you've also got your hosting and data storage fees. So even though you might keep it on your hard drive at home or in your office, data storage still has a cost. Okay, so even if you're hosting it online, there's obviously a cost there. The purchase of a hard drive and a computer and all that all adds to the cost. Part of your cost structure. And then also third-party data licenses. Often third-party data licenses are required when you want to purchase data from a third party and add your data to their data. So as I mentioned, whenever you have more attributes, the value increases. So if you are able to have a data set and you're getting a third-party data set, you review it and analyze it, provide insights from that data set, you can then resell that those insights, or even resell that data, because you're selling a data that has more value now. Okay, so in terms of your key activities for monetization, if you're looking to monetize, you've got data processing, your data collection, and your problem solving. Problem solving is the same as identifying insights. Then you've got your key resources, your intellectual property, collection tools, and business development. So business development is key because you need to understand, you need to research what company needs what. So as I gave the example with the insurance company, an insurance company often looks for healthcare data, or accident data, how many accidents are happening on a specific corner, how many accidents are happening in a specific neighborhood, because all of that forms part of the data that they will use to determine a fee that the user will pay in the end. So you need business development to actually take the time, research, find out who are the best people to sell the data to. Where can I get the most value for my data, right? And now a marketplace sort of solves some of those issues, because a marketplace, you have one person that is the seller and one person that's the buyer, right? So you have a lot of buyers looking on a marketplace to find specific data sets there. But obviously, if the buyer you're looking for does not go to the marketplace, you need to go and you need to go find them. You need to get their contact details, find their email, speak with them, and then essentially try and sell your product to them. And then in terms of your key partners, third-party data sources, as I mentioned, it is very, very important to find people that actually complement your data offering. Okay, if you are collecting data for whatever it might be, and you find someone else that has a complementary data set, and then if you two add those two data sets together, you can then sell it for more, right? It's more valuable. You need to actually then develop a partnership with them and say, okay, let's add these two data sets together, and then let's sell the data, and obviously we can split whatever we get from the sale of that data. Okay, and your other key partner is the data marketplace. As I mentioned, you can add your data on there. You can then also negotiate with them and say, oh, look, I have this data set. I've noticed that you don't have any of this data, and there are a number of buyers. I would rather put my data on here. You can reduce the fees that I might have to pay to use your service, and negotiate it that way. Okay, remember, you don't always have to pay what they say. You can negotiate with all data marketplaces from my experience. Right. From my side, I don't have anything except this one more statement here, which is every app, website, digital business should sell their data as part of their business strategy. So remember, it's not the only business strategy that you are engaging in, right? It's not your core business, but it will form part of your business, right? So even if you have a tuck shop, right, and you're selling milk, sweets, and bread, right? If you're collecting data about how much people are actually buying, so you know that on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, bread gets sold. You sell the most amount of brown bread, for example, on that day. And then Saturday and Sunday, there's a ton of milk that's being sold. On Fridays, everybody buys ice cream. The data that you're actually collecting there can be used by yourself to identify the trends. So you're not buying milk every day. You're actually buying a lot more milk on a Thursday, because you know Friday and Saturday, people are going to be buying a lot of it. The other insight that you gain from that, or data that you gain from that, is that data can actually then be sold to the milk producers, right? The people that actually make the milk, the people that make the ice creams. They also need to understand how people are buying. When do people buy these things? What flavor do they buy the most? They are running all of these sorts of analysis in the background, but a lot of the time they do it on a macro scale. So, for example, like macro, they look at how many people are buying stuff from macro, but it's very, very difficult to actually understand what people are buying from in a little store, in a little convenience shop that you might have. So that's one way that you can actually, even just thinking about a little tuck shop, that's how you can use your data you have and actually try to monetize it. Yeah, so from my side, I just want to say thank you very much. I know we are out of time. We also need to look at the APIs, but I don't think we'll actually have time for that today. But I will put up all the API information. I'll also put this deck onto the Slack channel. If you want to if you want to reach out to me, my email address is there, clint.leander@here.com. And my job primarily is data acquisition, monetization, and business development. So a lot of what we spoke about here is what I do on a daily basis. Which is why Tiana and them asked me to give a bit of a talk on it. Please feel free to ask any more questions that you might have. I'm going to answer the one here from Andile. He says, I have data and I want to review that. I worry that some of the software that we already use has a license. I'm thinking which is better copy left over proprietary, over LGPL, or over public, over permissive. Andile, I'm not sure. You lost me there with the last line. But in terms of software and licenses, I don't know much about that. I know about data licensing. So in terms of software, if you're using software to analyze data, I could be wrong, but in what I think it is that the software you're using, that's fine, even though the software doesn't have a license specifically. Whatever data you are extracting from that software, that's yours, and you can sell that data to whoever you want. It's independent of the software license and the data license. You don't need to worry about it, if that's your question. And then another one, do you here provide data to insurance companies by request? We don't specifically provide data to insurance companies. What we do is we facilitate that. So for example, if I find a supplier that has a lot of health data or data that might be relevant to an insurer, I can then link the two of them up and say, hey, this person wants this data. Can you please assist them with it? And then we'd let them go ahead and continue with their business, essentially. The other way that we'll do it also is that using the data marketplace, we would ask the supplier with the data to go on the data marketplace, and then we would also request the insurance company to also log into the data marketplace, and then they can operate on the data marketplace, because the data marketplace also has contracts, agreements, notification letters, memorandums of understanding, cost structures, all that sort of stuff is already there, is available as a service. So you can use it that way as well. Yeah. I see there are no other questions at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions, feel free to unmute and please go ahead and ask. Yes, Andile, I see your hand up.
Hi, Clint. So I have been using here in a couple of projects because I love the way that the API is so easy to use. But I'm wondering now, because I've got these many apps that are using this, and people are updating their interactions on the apps. One is tracking, for instance, food, and where people can buy food. So people are then creating their own places. It creates a pin, and then people then go in and interact with that pin. It's literally a small Photoshop, I think. And would there be any value in that kind of data?
Hi, everyone.
How would I monetize that?
Clint?
I'll get you now, Andile. Hey, Michelle, sorry, I was just getting a question.
No worries. So there's a hand up. I am going to close the recording very soon. When you guys are done, just give me a heads up, and then I'll just stop the recording.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. Will do. Yes, so Andile, I just want to make sure I understand your question. You said that you're obviously using a couple of APIs to identify the location, and some of your users are adding in locations that are missing, right? Would that be correct?
Well, they're adding pins. I'm using the map, and then all that I'm doing is using the discovery so that people can then add pins on top of a particular area to say that, oh, this is my new shop. And then I'm using that pin that has been created to then direct people to that particular shop.
Okay, 100%. So
is there any value in that kind of data from a here perspective or generally?
Yes, I would say that there is. So that is some of the data, or the primary data that we do normally purchase is point of interest data. That's what you're collecting at the moment. So in terms of your the user, as long as the user is inputting, like I said, the attributes. So you've got the location, you've got the longitude, latitude, which is fantastic. You've got the name of the store. You know, if they add in their operating hours, maybe even a contact number, that would really, if you can obtain more attributes, that's always better, as I said. But in terms of monetizing that is something that we'd be interested in 100%. So I'll definitely, you can either email me or I can share my number here. Just send me a message. We can have another call because it is data that we are looking for, especially in I would say more rural settings. That data is always difficult to find, and it's always changing. So we're always looking for people that have a way to actually collect that data, and it's something that we'd be interested in purchasing. Cool. So yes, it can be monetized. Any other questions?
I see Andile's hand is up. I'm not sure if it's the same hand.
It's a new one. Just the last one.
Yeah.
So for this current hackathon, I'm thinking of creating something that is then going to look at your community groups. So for instance, looking at your gated communities, or looking at your civil society groupings, and basically creating ring fences as to, this is a neighborhood watch, this is where they would be operating, these are the times, these are the crimes, and these are the problems that they have in that particular community. Is there, besides here, is there a way in which that kind of data could then be monetized for somebody else? So I know that here would may be interested in that kind of data, but can you think of a way in which that kind of GIS data could then be monetized for somebody else? So for instance, you know, a printing company, a map, map printing company, or a news company. Is there any value in that? And would that data, would they need to use my data directly, or would they need to use the data that you as here would then provide aggregated over that?
I see. So let me just say it again, just so I understand, make sure I've got it. So the data that you want to collect, we normally call it a geofence. So you want to add a geofence around a specific area and have a look at the crimes or incidents in that specific area. Would that be right? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in terms of the people that would normally purchase that kind of data, depending on the amount of data. So let's say, for example, City of Cape Town. I've had this request before where a tourism company approached us and said, "Do you have all of the? We want to know where the crime hotspots are in a specific city, especially Cape Town, because there's a lot of international tourists there." And they were looking to purchase that data from us in terms of where the crimes are happening. Unfortunately, we don't collect that. And the police, they don't really collect the actual location of a crime. They just collect it in a specific suburb. So if we say Randburg, they'll say there was 5 muggings in Randburg. So in terms of the monetization of that data, tourism companies normally want that because they want to they want to highlight where the bad areas are, and they want their users to stay out of that area, or at least give them a warning that people are getting mugged in this area, so please be careful. So that's how you can monetize. In terms of from a here perspective, as I mentioned, it is data we are looking for, I would say, to try and monetize it. But currently, I'd say that there's no way that we wouldn't purchase it right now. We first have to have quite a bit of data before we would sort of be willing to purchase data. To purchase that data. But there are ways, there are people that's looking for it. It really just is determined by how much coverage you have. So if you have the entire coverage for, or let's say at least Cape Town City CBD, right? That's a busy tourist area, and you can accurately say where crimes are happening. And it's really, really sort of up to date, almost live or static. So as soon as someone is reporting a crime, it gets highlighted, and the actual location is highlighted. then that's good. And I think that's data that there's a number of tourism companies. I can give you a couple who would be keen on that data, but they also want a wide range, right? They want a big net. They want Joburg, Durban, Cape Town, around Table Mountain, Camps Bay. So if it's small, then it's sort of it's too small for them to do anything with, or to actually push, right? As a business, to say, here we've launched this really cool app where you can see where crimes are occurring, but it's only in this small area. Cool. Anyone else? Tandanani, did you have a question? No?
No, I'm good.
All right. Okay, then if no one else has any other questions, please feel free. Like I said, my phone number's there. You just WhatsApp me, and we can always have a chat, or you can get me on Slack. I'm already on the hackathon Slack, so you can also contact me there, and feel free to email me if you have any more questions. But from my side, I think we're done then. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. It was great to speak with you today. And hopefully you learned something. I hope it was informative.